I've long since given up on trying to persuade people it was the right decision. In a sense, what I try to persuade people of now is understand how complex and difficult a decision it was.
179 British service personnel killed, a financial cost to this country alone of more than £9 billion, and perhaps more than 120,000 civilian lives lost since the war began. 10 years on, what have we learned from Iraq?
I think if we look back over the interventions of the last decade, starting with Iraq in 2003, the single most important point that comes through to me is the understanding that the military are only part of the solution. The military can kick the door in, of course they can, but somebody else has got to go through the door, politically, with developmental aid, and it's got to be coordinated. And we've learned time and time again that after the first 6 or 8 months, the international community has usually become part of the problem instead of part of the solution.
If we hadn't removed Saddam from power, just think, for example, what would be happening if these Arab revolutions were continuing now, and Saddam, who's probably 20 times as bad as Assad in Syria, was trying to suppress an uprising in Iraq. I mean, think of the consequences of leaving that regime in power.
I think in many ways the Iraqi intervention came 10 years or more too late. I think there was a window of opportunity after the first Gulf War in 1991 where the majority of the population actually rose up against Saddam, and I think that's when they required the support from the international community. 10 years on, it was mislabeled as an intervention for weapons of mass destruction that ultimately were never found, and I think that tarnished the image of humanitarian intervention, and I think that's to the detriment of countries such as Syria now.
According to Iraq Body Count, the number of violent civilian deaths in Iraq during 2012 rose for the first time in 3 years, 4,568, up by more than 10% from 2011. Is there really progress?
What you can see in Iraq is a kind of disordered growth, a sort of disordered success. And we shouldn't be deceived by the degree of violence and disorder into thinking that the place is not potentially rich, because it is. And a lot of international companies see that and reckon that they can live with the disorder and invest in the country, and that is beginning to happen.
The infrastructure is still struggling. The political situation is still actually quite critical. And to be honest, the future remains uncertain. However, Iraqis are not passive bystanders anymore. They are actually a part of this new democracy, and they can help shape it. And I think that's a very big difference to how it was 10 years ago.
Perhaps the most surprising lesson from Iraq? Rule nothing out.
I've lived my life in this analysis business, predicting that the next 5 years won't see very much military intervention, and actually the next 5 years has been extraordinarily busy. So you can never rule these things out. Particularly when we're talking about the changes that are taking place in the Middle East, which are pretty fundamental at the moment.